Welcome to Readings in English. Here, we bring you powerful stories designed to improve your English skills while capturing your imagination. Whether you're just starting out or already on your language learning journey, you've come to the right place to experience the beauty of storytelling in English. Why English? The English language is a gateway to the world. Spoken by over 1.5 billion people across the globe, it connects cultures, inspires creativity, and opens doors to countless opportunities. By immersing yourself in English through stories, you're not just learning grammar or vocabulary, you're stepping into new worlds, understanding different perspectives, and building the confidence to express yourself in a universal language. What makes stories so powerful? Stories are more than just words. They evoke emotions, challenge your thinking, and create memorable connections with the language. Through engaging narratives, you'll naturally pick up new words, phrases, and expressions while enjoying an unforgettable adventure. Today's story, The Forgotten Diary. In this episode, we'll journey to a quiet village in Italy where a curious teenager named Lorenzo stumbles upon a mysterious diary written in English. This diary isn't just a relic of the past, it's a doorway to a tale of courage, betrayal, and redemption during one of history's darkest times. As Lorenzo works to uncover the secrets within the diary, he not only improves his English, but also discovers the power of storytelling to connect generations and heal old wounds. This is a heartwarming and thought-provoking story that will immerse you in the language while exploring themes of kindness, bravery, and the complexities of human nature. So sit back, relax, and let the Forgotten Diary inspire your learning journey. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that bring English to life. Let's begin. The afternoon sun cast long, golden rays over the narrow cobblestone streets of San Pietro, a quiet village tucked into the rolling hills of northern Italy. Lorenzo shuffled through the dirt path that led to the edge of the village, his worn sneakers kicking up small clouds of dust. He had no particular destination, just the usual escape from the humdrum of his family's farm, where responsibilities seemed to multiply by the day. His wanderings led him to an abandoned house he had passed countless times. The structure was a ghost of its former self, with ivy crawling up its stone walls and broken windows that gaped like empty sockets. Most villagers avoid the place, brushing it off as nothing more than a relic of a bygone era. But today, Lorenzo felt an inexplicable pull toward it. Pushing open the creaky wooden door, he entered cautiously, his steps echoing on the warped floorboards. The air inside was thick with the scent of damp wood and decay. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the roof, illuminating floating dust particles like tiny constellations. Lorenzo's curiosity deepened as he ventured further into the house, weaving between scattered debris and overturned furniture. In what appeared to have once been a study, his eyes landed on a small, leather-bound book resting atop a pile of old newspapers. Unlike the rest of the room, the book seemed oddly well preserved, as though it had been waiting for someone to find it. Lorenzo picked it up, brushing off a thin layer of dust. The cover bore no title, only the initials J are etched faintly into the leather. Opening the book, Lorenzo flipped through its yellowed pages filled with handwritten notes. To his dismay, the script was entirely in English, a language he could barely understand beyond a few common phrases. He recognized dates scrawled in the margins, some from the 1940s, hinting at the diary's age. The entries were detailed with a tone that seemed urgent and personal. Though the meaning of the words eluded him, Lorenzo's imagination sparked to life. Who was J? Or why had this diary been left behind? And what stories did these pages hold? Determined to find out, he tucked the diary under his arm and made his way back home, his mind racing with questions. Lorenzo sat cross-legged on the wooden floor of his small bedroom, the diary open before him. A weathered Italian English dictionary borrowed from the school library lay beside him. His room was modest white plaster walls adorned with a few faded posters, a single bed pushed against the corner, and a desk cluttered with half-finished sketches. The room's simplicity contrasted with the vast mystery unfolding in the pages before him. He squinted at the diary's spidery handwriting, his lips moving silently as he attempted to decipher one line at a time. Translating was tedious, requiring constant reference to the dictionary. Still, every small breakthrough felt monumental. After hours of effort, he managed to piece together a short passage. December 14th, 1943. The cold is biting today, and my strength wanes. If not for the kindness of strangers, I might not have made it this far. They risk everything for me, and yet I feel the shadows of betrayal growing closer. The words sent a shiver down Lorenzo's spine. Who were these kind strangers? And what betrayal did the writer fear? The passage painted a vivid picture of a desperate situation, and Lorenzo's curiosity only deepened. He marked the page with a scrap of paper and moved on. Several entries later, Lorenzo uncovered another snippet. I heard them coming last night. Footsteps heavy and deliberate. I fear my time here is running out. If I am captured, let this diary remain as proof of their courage. The urgency in the words struck Lorenzo. The writer's fear and gratitude were palpable, even through the barrier of language. But the cryptic nature of the entries left him craving more context. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft amber glow through his window, Lorenzo's eyes burned from hours of effort. He leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair. The diary held secrets, that much was clear, but if he truly wanted to understand the full story, his grasp of English needed to improve, and fast. The next morning, Lorenzo made his way to the village library, a humble building nestled between the bakery and the post office. The librarian, a gray-haired woman named Signora Bertelli, raised an eyebrow as he approached the counter with a request for more English resources. English. "Why on earth do you need to study that?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. Lorenzo hesitated, reluctant to reveal the diary just yet. I'm curious about something I found," he replied vaguely. Signora Bertelli, though puzzled, obliged and handed him a small pile of English grammar books and phrase guides. Lorenzo thanked her and hurried home, eager to continue his quest. That evening, armed with new tools, Lorenzo resumed his work. His efforts bore fruit as he translated a new entry referencing a location, a hillside near the village. The diary hinted at something being left behind there, though the exact nature of it remained unclear. Excitement coursed through Lorenzo as he realized he wasn't just uncovering a story, he was piecing together a mystery. The aroma of fresh bread filled the kitchen as Lorenzo's mother, Lucia, pulled a steaming loaf from the oven. Lorenzo sat at the small wooden table, his hands absent-mindedly tracing the edges of the diary tucked in his lap. He had planned to return to his room unnoticed, but his grandmother, Nona, entered with her sharp eyes fixed on him. "What's that you've got there?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "Just a book," Lorenzo replied hesitantly, knowing how quickly his Nonna could sniff out secrets. "A book. Since when do you spend so much time reading, and in English, no less?" Nona crossed her arms, her wrinkled face scrunching into a frown. Lucia, setting the bread on the counter to cool, turned to her son with equal curiosity. "What's this about English? Shouldn't you be focusing on your chores instead of wasting time on pointless hobbies?" "It's not pointless," Lorenzo said, his voice firmer than usual. "I found something in an old diary. It's written in English, and I want to understand what it says." Nana's frown deepened. "A diary from that house, Lorenzo. Leave the past where it belongs. You don't know what kind of trouble those old stories can bring." Lorenzo's chest tightened. "What do you mean by trouble? Did you know the person who wrote it?" Her sharp glare silenced him. "Enough questions. That house is cursed with memories better left forgotten. Focus on what's important, helping your family." Lorenzo clenched his fists under the table. He knew better than to push further, but his determination only grew stronger. As his Nonna left the room, muttering under her breath, Lorenzo turned to his mother. "I promise I'm not neglecting my work," he said earnestly. I feel like this is important." Lucia sighed, softening her tone. "It's good to be curious, but don't lose sight of your responsibilities." "That's all I ask." Later that evening, Lorenzo retreated to his room, the weight of his family's disapproval heavy on his mind. He flipped open the diary, staring at the delicate handwriting. Who had written these words, and why was Nona so adamant about staying away from the past? The next day, Lorenzo sought out Marco, his closest friend, who worked at his family's small vineyard on the outskirts of the village. Marco was a year older, taller, and often full of humor, but he had a knack for listening when it mattered. "Lorenzo, you look like you've just seen a ghost," Marco teased as his friend approached. "Not a ghost," Lorenzo replied, holding up the diary. "That may be the next closest thing." Single quotes. Marco wiped his hands on his jeans and peered at the book. "What's this?" "Another one of your little adventures." Lorenzo grinned. "Something like that. It's a diary I found in the old house, but it's in English, and I need help translating it." Marco whistled. "English, huh? That's ambitious. What's in it that's so important?" "Secrets, I think," Lorenzo said, lowering his voice. "It talks about people risking their lives during the war and mentions something hidden near the village." Marco's curiosity was piqued. "All right, let's see what we can do." The two of them spent the afternoon poring over the diary, their heads bent close as they attempted to make sense of the text. Marco's limited knowledge of English was a step above Lorenzo's, and together they managed to piece together another significant passage. "If I do not return, it is because my trust was misplaced. Still, I believe there is good here. I have hidden what I could. Perhaps someone braver than I will find it." Lorenzo sat back, heart pounding. "What do you think it means?" "What did they hide?" Marco shrugged. "It could be anything. Supplies, documents. Treasure, treasure?" Lorenzo repeated, a grin spreading across his face. "Hey, who knows? These wartime stories always have treasure, right?" Marco said with a laugh. "But seriously, if there's something hidden out there, how are you going to find it?" Lorenzo stared at the diary thoughtfully. "We keep translating. Maybe the rest of the entries will tell us where to look." Marco nodded, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "All right. Let's solve this mystery." As the sun began to set, painting the vineyard in shades of gold and amber, Lorenzo felt a surge of hope. With Marco's help, the diary's secrets didn't seem so unattainable. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they uncovered might bring consequences far greater than either of them anticipated. The village was alive with its usual hum of activity, vendors hawking fresh produce, children chasing one another through the narrow alleys, and elders gathering in the central square to exchange stories. Lorenzo weaved through the bustling crowd, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of the diary. Something about its contents lingered, like a puzzle begging to be solved. He made his way to the church, where the town's modest library occupied a small annex. The librarian, Signora Bertelli, greeted him with her usual stern expression, her silver-framed glasses slipping down her nose. "Back again, Lorenzo? What are you looking for this time?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Do we have any books or records about the war? Specifically about San Pietro during the 1940s, he asked, keeping his tone casual. Signora Bertelli adjusted her glasses and gave him a searching look. "Not much survives from that time, but there are a few things. Why the sudden interest?" "I'm just curious," Lorenzo replied, offering her a polite smile. She disappeared into the back room, and returned with a dusty ledger and a slim book titled Memories of San Pietro. Lorenzo thanked her and took a seat at one of the creaky wooden desks. Flipping through the ledger, he found lists of named villagers who had lived and died during the war. Many were marked with crosses, indicating those who hadn't survived. His eyes scanned the names until one stood out, Giovanni Russo. The initials matched the diary. J.R. Heart Racing. Lorenzo turned to Memories of San Pietro. The book was a compilation of anecdotes from elderly villagers who had lived through the war. One story caught his attention, a vague reference to an American soldier who had been hidden by a family in the village. The story was incomplete, fragmented by the passage of time, but it described a young woman who had risked her life to shelter the soldier. There were whispers that someone in the village had betrayed them, leading to the soldier's capture. Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, his thoughts spinning. Was this soldier from the diary the same person mentioned in the book, and who had betrayed them? As he left the library, clutching his notes, a wave of unease settled over him. The deeper he delved into the diary, the more it seemed to stir the village's long-buried secrets. That evening, Lorenzo and Marco sat in the clearing behind Marco's family vineyard, the diary open between them. A lantern cast a warm glow over the pages as they worked to decode another passage. Here, Marco said, pointing to a line they had been struggling with. I think it says, near the oak where the river bends. Does that make sense? Lorenzo nodded. That must be the hill by the east side of the village. There's a large oak tree near the stream. Excitement buzzed between them as they realized they had stumbled upon a potential location. The diary's words hinted at something left behind, something significant. The next morning, Lorenzo packed a small satchel with essentials and headed to the hill with Marco. The oak tree stood tall and majestic, its roots sprawling like veins through the earth. The stream babbled softly nearby, the sound soothing despite their growing anticipation. Marco wielded a small spade, digging carefully near the base of the tree, while Lorenzo sifted through the loose dirt with his hands. After what felt like hours, Marco's spade struck something solid. Got it, he exclaimed, his voice breaking the stillness. They unearthed a small, rusted tin box, its hinges barely holding together. Lorenzo's hands trembled as he pried it open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were several items: a faded photograph of a young man and woman, a tarnished silver locket, and a folded piece of paper. The photograph was sepia-toned, the faces blurred with age. The locket bore an engraving of initials that matched the diary, but it was the note that captured Lorenzo's attention. Unfolding the paper carefully, he read aloud, "To whoever finds this, these are the memories of those who dared to believe in kindness during dark times. Guard them well." Marco let out a low whistle. This is incredible, but what does it mean? Lorenzo's eyes remained fixed on the note. It means there's more to this story. These items were hidden for a reason, and we need to figure out why. Single quotes. They packed the items back into the box and agreed to keep their discovery a secret, at least for now. As they made their way back to the village, Lorenzo couldn't help but wonder what other truths the diary would reveal and what consequences might follow. The sun was beginning to set as Lorenzo entered his family's small farmhouse, the tin box tucked under his arm. The warm light streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating his grandmother, Nona, who sat at the table peeling potatoes. Her sharp eyes immediately caught sight of the box. "What's that you've brought home now?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Lorenzo hesitated, debating whether to share the discovery. But the questions swirling in his mind pushed him forward. He set the box on the table and opened it, carefully laying out the photograph, the locket, and the folded note. Nana's hands froze mid-motion. Her face paled as her gaze fell on the photograph. "Where did you get these?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "By the old oak near the stream," Lorenzo replied. "The diary led me there." "Nona, do you know who these people are?" Her expression hardened, and she quickly stood, brushing past him as she muttered, "You shouldn't have gone digging where you don't belong. Wait." Lorenzo called after her, his frustration boiling over. "You've been acting strange ever since I found the diary. What are you hiding?" Nona stopped at the doorway, her back to him. "Some things are better left buried, Lorenzo. The past can bring nothing but trouble, but why?" He pressed, his voice softer. "The diary talks about bravery and betrayal. It mentions people risking everything to help someone. If you know something, please tell me." For a moment, she stood silent, gripping the doorframe. Then, with a heavy sigh, she turned to face him. "Fine," she said, her voice low but steady. "I'll tell you enough so that you'll stop asking. The young man in the photograph was an American soldier during the war. He was hidden in this village, but someone betrayed him. That's all you need to know." "Who betrayed him?" Lorenzo asked, but Nona shook her head. "It doesn't matter. What's done is done." She left the room, leaving Lorenzo with more questions than answers. The following days were tense. Nona avoided Lorenzo whenever possible, and his mother, Lucia, grew increasingly impatient with his distractions. "Lorenzo, I need you to stop running around with that diary and focus on your chores," she said one morning as they worked in the garden. "We rely on you, and you've been neglecting your responsibilities." "I'm not running around," Lorenzo argued, though he knew his mother had a point. "I'm trying to figure out something important. This isn't just a silly project. It feels like it," she shot back, brushing dirt off her hands. "Your Nana's been upset, and you're not helping." Lorenzo bit back a retort, knowing it would only worsen the situation. Instead, he spent the rest of the day completing his chores with a mind that refused to settle. Later, as he sat on the edge of the vineyard with Marco, he vented his frustrations. My family doesn't understand, Lorenzo said, tossing a stone into the stream. Nana's hiding something, and my mom just wants me to forget about all this. Marco leaned back against a tree. Maybe they're scared of what you'll find. People get weird when it comes to the past. But why? Lorenzo asked. The soldier in the diary sounds like he was brave. Shouldn't we honor people like that? Yeah, Marco agreed. That bravery always comes with a cost. Maybe your nonna paid that cost and doesn't want to remember. Lorenzo considered this, his mind replaying Nana's reaction to the photograph. Whatever had happened all those years ago, it had left scars that hadn't fully healed. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Turning, they saw Matteo, a boy from the village known for his nosy nature, approaching with a smug grin. "Hey, Lorenzo," Matteo called out. "Heard you've been poking around old war stories. What did you find?" Lorenzo tensed. "Nothing that concerns you, Matteo. Come on," Matteo teased. "Everyone's talking about how you've been digging up the past. If there's something interesting, why not share it?" "Because it's none of your business," Marco said firmly, stepping between Matteo and Lorenzo. Matteo laughed but eventually backed off. As he disappeared down the path, Marco turned to Lorenzo. "You need to be careful. If word gets out about the diary or that box, people might get the wrong idea." Lorenzo nodded, his jaw tight. The diary's secrets were already stirring tension, and he had a sinking feeling that things would only get worse. The morning air was crisp as Lorenzo sat at his desk, the diary spread open in front of him. He had barely slept, his mind replaying Nana's cryptic words and Matteo's meddlesome grin. Determined to unravel the mystery, he worked meticulously to translate another passage, the dictionary now a constant companion by his side. January 5th, 1944. "They told me this village was a place of safety. The faces here kind and welcoming felt like a shield. But even in the brightest light, shadows linger. I trusted someone I shouldn't have, and now my safety is fragile at best." Lorenzo's pulse quickened as he read the entry. The writer's growing sense of unease was palpable. Who had betrayed the soldier, and why? He turned the page, continuing his painstaking work until he uncovered another clue. "They warned me of someone close, someone who smiles while carrying secrets. I see it now, though too late. They are watching me, waiting for the moment to strike." The words sent a chill down Lorenzo's spine. The betrayal wasn't from an outsider, it had come from within the village. Unable to contain his thoughts, Lorenzo decided to visit Marco. Together, they pored over the diary, Marco leaning in with growing interest. "This confirms it," Marco said. "Whoever betrayed this soldier wasn't just a stranger. It was someone who gained his trust." "But who?" Lorenzo asked. "And what did they gain by turning him in?" Marco shrugged. "Maybe they thought it would protect themselves or their family. During the war, people did desperate things." Lorenzo nodded slowly, though the explanation offered little comfort. Whoever had betrayed the soldier had endangered not only his life, but likely the lives of others in the village. The mystery gnawed at him as he returned home. Nona was sitting in the kitchen, peeling vegetables, her face as unreadable as ever. "Nona," Lorenzo began cautiously, "do you know who betrayed the soldier?" Her hands paused for a brief moment before resuming their work. "Why does it matter now?" "He's long gone, and so are those days. It matters because the diary tells a story," Lorenzo said, his voice steady, "a story of bravery and betrayal. Don't you think people should know the truth?" Nana's gaze met his, her eyes shadowed with a mix of sadness and defiance. "The truth is rarely as simple as you think, Lorenzo. Leave it alone." But Lorenzo couldn't. The more she resisted, the more determined he became to uncover the full story. It was a quiet evening when the unthinkable happened. Lorenzo had left the diary on his desk, as he often did after long hours of translating. He'd gone to help his mother with dinner, assuming it would be safe in the solitude of his room. But when he returned, the diary was gone. His heart sank as he tore through the room, searching frantically. The desk drawers, the bookshelves, even under the bed, nothing. The diary, the key to all his discoveries, had vanished. "Marco," Lorenzo muttered under his breath, grabbing his jacket and heading toward the vineyard. When he reached Marco's house, his friend greeted him with confusion. "What's wrong?" Marco asked. "The diary, it's gone," Lorenzo blurted. "Someone took it." Marco's expression darkened. "Who would do that?" As they talked, a sinking realization dawned on Lorenzo. "Matteo," he said, the name escaping his lips like a curse. Marco frowned. "You think he'd really steal it?" "Who else?" Lorenzo snapped. "He's been nosy about it since the beginning." Without another word, they headed toward Matteo's house. It was dark by the time they arrived, and Lorenzo felt a surge of anger as he knocked on the door. Matteo opened it, his smug grin confirming Lorenzo's suspicions. "Looking for something?" Matteo asked, holding up the diary. "You had no right to take that," Lorenzo said, his voice low and cold. Matteo shrugged. "You've been acting like it's some big treasure. I thought I'd take a look for myself." "Give it back," Marco demanded, stepping forward. "And why should I?" Matteo taunted. "You've been hiding it from everyone. Maybe the rest of the village deserves to know what's inside." "Matteo," Lorenzo said, his fists clenched. "This isn't a game. That diary belongs to someone who lived through the war. It's not yours to share." For a moment, Matteo hesitated, his bravado faltering. Finally, he tossed the diary toward Lorenzo. "Fine, take it. It's not like I could read much of it anyway." Lorenzo caught the book, relief flooding through him. "Stay out of this," he said firmly. As they walked away, Marco glanced at Lorenzo. "What if Matteo tells people about the diary anyway?" Lorenzo sighed. "Then we'll have to deal with that when it comes. For now, I just want to keep going before anyone else tries to stop me." Back home, Lorenzo placed the diary back on his desk. vowing never to leave it unattended again. As he opened it to the last entry he had translated, his resolve deepened. The soldier's story deserved to be told no matter the cost. Lorenzo's hands hovered over the diary as the weight of recent events settled in his chest. The theft by Matteo had been a stark reminder that the diary wasn't just a personal project anymore. Its revelations had the power to disrupt lives and stir old tensions in the village. He knew he needed to tread carefully, but his resolve to uncover the truth remained unshaken. The next morning, Lorenzo returned to the library, where Signora Bertelli greeted him with a wary glance. "You've been quite the regular lately," she remarked, her curiosity barely concealed. "I'm looking for anything else we might have about the war," Lorenzo said. "Stories, records, anything about the people who lived here back then." Signora Bertelli tapped her chin thoughtfully. "There's not much left from that time, but I do recall a box of old documents in the back." "Give me a moment." She disappeared into the archives and returned with a dusty cardboard box filled with faded photographs, letters, and clippings from the village's past. Lorenzo sifted through them carefully, his heart bounding, when he found a photograph of a group of villagers standing outside the church. His eyes focused on two figures, in particular a young woman with striking features and a man in a military uniform. The woman looked eerily like a younger version of his Nona, and the man, could it be the soldier from the diary? Alongside the photograph was a typewritten letter detailing a wartime incident. It referenced the sheltering of an American soldier and a raid by German troops that had resulted in the soldier's capture. Though the letter didn't name names, it spoke of a betrayal from within, confirming what Lorenzo had already uncovered in the diary. "Signora," Lorenzo asked cautiously, holding up the letter, "do you know anything about this raid?" The librarian hesitated. "I was just a child then, but everyone knew about the soldier. Some called him a hero, others thought he brought trouble. There were whispers about who betrayed him, but no one ever confessed. Do you remember anyone specific being accused?" Signora Bertelli shook her head. "It was all rumors, but I'd suggest you ask your Nona. She lived through it." Lorenzo thanked her and laughed, his mind racing. If his Nona had been involved, what role had she played? Was she the one who had helped the soldier or betrayed him? That evening, Lorenzo sat across from his Nona at the dinner table. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. His mother and father had already retired for the night, leaving the two alone. "Nona," Lorenzo began carefully, "I found something else about the soldier. There was a raid, and someone betrayed him." Nona stiffened, her hands pausing mid-movement. "I know you were involved," Lorenzo continued. "I saw the photograph in the library. You were there." Her expression darkened, and she placed her fork down deliberately. "Why can't you let this go?" Lorenzo, digging up the past won't change anything. because I need to understand, he said, his voice steady. The diary tells one part of the story, but you know the rest, please, Nona. Tell me the truth. Nana's shoulders slumped, and she leaned back in her chair, the weight of decades etched into her face. After a long silence, she spoke. His name was John, she said quietly. He was a soldier separated from his unit. When he arrived in the village, he was starving, barely alive. My family took him in, gave him food, shelter. We hid him in the attic of the house he loved to explore. Her voice faltered, and Lorenzo leaned forward, urging her to continue. We thought we were safe, but someone in the village must have seen him or suspected. The Germans came one night. They searched every house, and they found him. Lorenzo's heart sank. Did you betray him? Her eyes snapped up to meet his, blazing with indignation. Never. I risked everything to keep him safe. But someone I thought I could trust told the soldiers that betrayal cost us all dearly. Who? Lorenzo pressed. Nona shook her head. I won't name them. Their family is still part of this village, and nothing good will come from reopening those wounds. But John, Lorenzo said softly, he was taken away. Nona replied, her voice breaking. We never heard from him again. I kept the photograph and his locket as reminders of the courage he showed Dan, the shame of those who turned against him. Lorenzo felt a surge of both sorrow and pride. His Nona had risked her life for someone she barely knew, carrying the burden of that loss for decades. Thank you for telling me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Nona nodded, her eyes glistening. Just remember, Lorenzo, the past is complicated. People make choices in desperate times, some brave, some cowardly. But those stories deserve to be remembered, even if they hurt. As Lorenzo returned to his room at night, he placed the diary, the photograph, and the locket carefully on his desk. He finally had the answers he sought, but the weight of those truths would stay with him forever. The next morning, Lorenzo stood at the edge of the village square, clutching the diary, the photograph, and the locket. The day's sunlight bathed the cobblestones in warmth, and the air buzzed with the chatter of villagers going about their routines. Despite his usual hesitation to draw attention to himself, Lorenzo felt compelled to act. He approached the church steps, where a group of elders often gathered, including Signor Bertelli and several others who had lived through the war. As he climbed the stairs, conversations quieted, and curious eyes turned toward him. Lorenzo, what brings you here with such purpose? Signora Bertelli asked, her gaze flicking to the items in his hands. I've been working on something, Lorenzo said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. I found a diary, a soldier's diary from the war. It tells a story about this village, about bravery, kindness, and betrayal. A murmur swept through the crowd, some faces lighting with intrigue, others shadowed with unease. I've spoken to my Nona, Lorenzo continued. She confirmed what the diary says. During the war, an American soldier named John was hidden here, but someone betrayed him, and he was taken away. Gasps rippled through the group. Some exchanged looks of shock, while others seemed to shrink in discomfort. "I'm not here to point fingers," Lorenzo said, his tone firm. "The past is complicated, and I know people made choices they thought were right at the time. But I believe John's story deserves to be told, and his memory deserves to be honored." He opened the locket, revealing the initials engraved inside, and held up the photograph. "This is him." "And this," he said, holding up the diary, "is his story." Silence fell over the square, heavy with emotion. Then, slowly, Signora Bertelli spoke. "I remember the rumors about that soldier. Many of us were afraid, unsure of who to trust. But your Nonna, she was braver than most." Heads nodded in agreement, and Lorenzo saw the tension in his Nonna's posture ease slightly as she stepped forward. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. That's all any of us can hope to do in times of darkness, what we believe is right." The villagers listened intently, some with tears in their eyes. Lorenzo felt a wave of pride swell within him. His Nonna's courage had not only shaped her life, but had also left a legacy worth remembering. John believed in the kindness of this village. Even after he was betrayed, Lorenzo said, "Let's honor that kindness by preserving his story." By the time Lorenzo finished, the crowd had transformed. Faces once marked by suspicion and hesitation now bore expressions of respect and reflection. A month later, Lorenzo stood in front of the same oak tree where he and Marco had unearthed the tin box. This time he wasn't alone. The entire village had gathered for a small ceremony to honor John and those who had helped him. A plaque had been placed at the base of the tree, engraved with the words, "To those who dared to believe in kindness during the darkest of times. May their courage never be forgotten." Nonna stood beside Lorenzo, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She had hesitated to attend, fearing old wounds might resurface, but the warmth of the villagers' support had eased her fears. As the ceremony concluded, Lorenzo felt a sense of closure settle over him. The diary, once a source of mystery and conflict, had brought the village together in an unexpected way. Later that evening, Lorenzo sat at his desk, flipping through the now complete diary. Every page had been translated, its story preserved not just for him, but for anyone willing to learn from the past. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Marco entered, holding an envelope. "This came for you," he said, handing it over with a grin. Lorenzo opened the envelope to find a letter from a historical society in the city. They had heard about his work on the diary and were inviting him to present John's story at a conference. "Looks like you've got your next adventure lined up," Marco said with a laugh. Lorenzo smiled. "Yeah, but this time, it's not just about solving a mystery. It's about sharing something that matters. As the days turned into weeks, Lorenzo prepared to leave the village for the first time in his life. His Nona saw him off at the train station, her eyes glistening with both pride and sadness. "Don't forget where you come from," she said, pressing the locket into his hand. "I won't," Lorenzo promised, "and I'll make sure others don't forget either." The train pulled away, carrying him toward a future shaped by the past he had uncovered. Though the village of San Pietro grew smaller in the distance, its stories and lessons stayed firmly in Lorenzo's heart. The forgotten diary had become much more than a relic of history. It had become a bridge between generations, a testament to courage, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness could shine through.